The UK and France have led the call for a two-state solution in the Middle East and the formal recognition of a Palestinian state at the UN. It also includes a plan for the future of Gaza that will not involve Hamas. Israel has condemned the move, and the current US administration wants no part of it. Will this move the needle to resolve a century-old conflict? I'm Hazem Sika, and this is the Newsmakers. It's the result of months of diplomatic work led by Saudi Arabia and France and presented at the UN meetings in New York this week. A plan to reinvigorate the calls for a two-state solution with a Palestinian state next to Israel and an international force to stabilise post-war Gaza. Now, supporters of Palestinian statehood call it a step in the right direction, even if it is a symbolic one. But without the diplomatic weight of the US behind it and no end to Israel's assault on Gaza in sight, will any of this make a difference on the ground? Here's a look.
At the United Nations, rare diplomatic unity. A new group of nations moving to recognise Palestine after decades of denial. The summit, convened under the General Assembly and co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia, set the stage for a long-delayed debate on Palestinian statehood. From the podium, Emmanuel Macron cast the moment as a turning point between the familiar cycle of war and the harder path of peace.
Bâtir la paix.
To build peace. That is what gathered us here. And that is the hope that could be built. As a new year opens for many, this is a choice to make, and this is our duty. Peace is a lot more demanding, a lot more difficult than any war, but the time has come.
Barred from New York by a US visa ban, Mahmoud Abbas appeared by video, pledging political change and a transition to statehood.
We underline our commitment to organize presidential and parliamentary elections after the end of the war and within 1 year. We will draft an interim constitution within 3 months to ensure the transfer of power from the authority to the state. This will ensure that no party or individual will participate unless they adhere to the political program and the international commitments of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the rules of international legitimacy.
France led the push to formally recognize Palestine, joined by Belgium, Malta, Luxembourg and others. A day earlier, Britain, Australia, Canada and Portugal had done the same, lifting the total to an estimated 156 nations now recognizing Palestine. And from the UN stage came a warning about the cost of failure.
What is the alternative? A one-state scenario where Palestinians are denied basic rights, expelled from their homes and their land, forced to live under perpetual occupation, discrimination and subjugation? How is this possible in the 21st century? How is it acceptable?
Yet recognition abroad contrasts with the reality at home. Gaza in ruins, the West Bank strangled, a Palestinian Authority drained of money, legitimacy and hope.
Before the recognition, I was a refugee, and after the recognition, I am still a refugee. Nothing has changed for us. I believe that these are just formalities, and their goal is to reduce the tension among the Western people who took to the streets.
Recognition travels the halls of the UN, but on the ground, Palestine remains a nation without freedom, its statehood declared abroad, but denied at home.
Well, joining me now to debate that and more are our guests from Bethlehem, Palestinian scientists Mazen Qomsiyeh, from Falls Church, Virginia in the United States, former Chief of Staff to the US Secretary of State Colin Powell, Lawrence Wilkerson. And from London, we have Professorial Research Associate at SOAS, Chaim Brashith. Good to have you all with us. So, Mazen, if I could start with you then, what practical effect does this recognition of a Palestinian state by an increasing number of nations at the UN have?
Well, from a Palestinian perspective here in Bethlehem, when I'm talking to people, most of them say there's no effect on them directly, that this is diplomatic maneuvers around the world, but they still see the genocide going on in the Gaza Strip, the attacks here in Bethlehem, the checkpoints increased by another 200 blockages and checkpoints all around us in the West Bank. The attack on people and on homes and properties continues unabated. If anything, they are accelerating. So they don't see a direct implication for their lives and livelihood on the ground.
Chaim Brashith, what pressure, if any, will this bring on Israel?
I don't think it will bring any pressure. Imagine I go to the bank and I give them money, and they give me a piece of paper saying Chaim Brashith has given us some money, but not saying how much or for how long. Basically, they agreed a Palestinian state. Where is this state? What are its borders? When will this happen? What sanctions are there to put on Israel to agree and accept it? Who will protect the Palestinians? Who will stop the genocide? This is total nonsense. This is just purely symbolical to make sure to pacify the populations who are seething and angry about what Israel is doing in Gaza. It means not a single Palestinian child will be saved by this. They won't be able to eat it or to take it as medication because it is totally symbolical.
Lawrence Wilkerson, what's your view on this? Will this make a difference to anyone on the ground there?
I agree completely with the two preceding speakers. In fact, I would say that the political leaders in many cases who are doing this are in deep trouble, especially Macron, Merz, Starmer, others, even the Australians, with their own public. And part of their political problem is their own public's growing awareness of the depth and breadth of this genocide in the Levant. And so they're trying to palliate that to a certain extent. They're trying to deal with it. And it's going to have no real substantive impact on the Palestinian situation, sad to say.
Muzzin, if I could turn back to you on this and talk a little bit more about the Palestinian side of this, and more specifically the Palestinian leadership. Where does Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas fit in to all of this? We heard him speaking at the UN via video link because, of course, he and his officials were not given visas to enter New York. What role, if any, is he going to play in all of this? Because there's been some criticism of his perceived lack of leadership and the fact that, I mean, he's been seen as kind of invisible in all of this.
Well, his Mahmoud Abbas's term has expired over 15 years ago, and he is still hanging on to power without any authority from the people. And there is no allowance for any democracy here. It's an authoritarian regime that is loved by the West, if you want, by people like Macron and a British Prime Minister and others, because they think he can fulfill Israel's dream of endless talk about two states without actually implementing anything to change reality on the ground, while allowing settlers and soldiers to continue their rampage, to continue their pogroms, as happened in the West Bank regularly, even last week, with settlers and soldiers doing whatever they wish to do to the remaining Palestinians and driving us out. And in Gaza, of course, the situation continues to deteriorate, and literal genocide extermination campaign is happening. What has the Palestinian Authority in its present constitution contributed to stopping that? Most Palestinians do not believe this authority and they believe that part of the reason why there's no allowance for elections is because they know they will not win elections if there is elections here that are free and open. So situation for the Palestinian Authority is not nice, to say the least. They're trying to hang on to power, but the situation will get even worse for them after this declaration. We saw what the British government said in their stipulations of these declarations. One is that they want the Palestinian Authority to basically not support any resistance, not even help the families of those murdered by Israel, whether they are resistance or not resistance, people in Israeli jails. Uh, the Palestinian Authority is not supposed to aid their families from our own tax money, of course. So Israel withholds most of our tax money. They also want the Palestinian Authority to change any mention of historic Palestine and talks merely about a rump Palestinian state, Alabantustans of South Africa, within parts of the West Bank, even recognizing Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem and so on. This is unacceptable conditions to any Palestinian. It may become acceptable to the Palestinian Authority, but that will even increase their isolation from their people. But those are the conditions that the British government and the French government, and soon I'm sure the American government, are going to put on recognition of the Palestinian state.
Lawrence Wilkerson, where do you see the U.S. role in as much as there is a U.S. role in all of this? Because we mentioned at the top how there isn't likely to be much success with this without any significant U.S. Diplomatic pressure behind it, which there isn't right now. Is Israel essentially going to be left to do what it wants at the moment under the current U.S. administration? And is this likely to deepen the rifts between the U.S. and Europe?
Let's start at the beginning. I was in the administration that the President, George W. Bush, met with Ariel Sharon when he was Prime Minister of Israel in 2004 in the Oval Office, and he told the Prime Minister of Israel that everything had failed. The roadmap, the Middle East peace process, Oslo, everything had failed. For over 40 years, everything had failed. And then, I think somewhat shocking Sharon, he said, over to you. From now on, the policy in that region for Israel is yours to make, and we will back you to the hill. So we mustn't blame all of this on Donald Trump, though I do, for current events, certainly blame it on Donald Trump. I've never seen an American president so in the back pocket of an Israeli prime minister, and in this case, a homicidal Israeli prime minister named Bibi Netanyahu. But that's the real essence of the United States posture now. Israel can do pretty much what it wants. Now, will that continue? This is the huge question in my mind. Will that continue through what Netanyahu is going to have to do in order to double and triple down on the disaster he's already created? And that is attack Iran, full-fledged attack on Iran, expecting, because from the 12-day excursion, the beautiful war that he had, he saw what Iran could do to Israel, very much so. They were shellacked in many respects. He's going to start that war expecting Donald Trump to follow him in. So your question boils down to, I think, and this is all going to happen before Thanksgiving in this country, before the third week in November.
Why'd you say that?
And he's going to expect Donald Trump to follow him in. And if Donald Trump follows him in, all bets are off, because that will be a disaster.
Why do you believe, Lawrence Wilkerson, why do you believe this is going to happen before Thanksgiving in the U.S., which is only about 2 months from now?
Right. It could happen much earlier. I think because that's when Netanyahu's political, personal, And Israel's, as a Jewish state, peril is going to be so great that he's going to judge it existential in all three of those categories. And the only way he has found to postpone, if you will, the inevitable is to deepen the strategic failure Israel is involved in. And the deepest it can go is now to reattack Iran, with Iran fully backed by Russia and backed by China. This is going to be a disaster for both Israel and the empire.
Haim Rashid, what's your take on this? Is Israel pretty much going to do what it wants for the foreseeable future?
Well, I totally accept my colleagues' views. Both of them are totally right. There is no one on the horizon that has done anything to stop Israel's criminal actions. Remember Doha and the bombing of the Hamas negotiators. People from all over the Arab world sat down and came and told us, we are very angry and we are going to do nothing at all about it. And you don't need to worry about it because it doesn't matter. What we think doesn't matter and we won't do anything. So this is what is happening. Look, if the vote was together with sanctions, for example, end the genocide now, withdrawal of the IDF, we agree to rights of the Palestinians in the whole of Palestine. We agree to the return of the refugees that the UN has decided on in Resolution 194. We agree to rebuilding of Gaza that the Americans and the Israelis who destroyed it are going to pay for. We agree to reparations. We agree to a protection force for Palestine, etc. Then the recognition would mean something. At the moment, it means nothing. And it also means that no one is able or willing, or both, to do anything about the genocide, to do anything about Gaza, to do anything about Israel, because the Americans are totally behind the madness that Israel is actually responsible for, together with the West. So I don't think that we need to take this nonsense, this theater of the UN into account. As it's very nice that after 108 years of supporting Zionism, Keir Starmer and the British government is saying that they support a Palestinian state. They have had more than a century of making sure that there is no Palestinian state. What does it all mean?
Mazin Qumsiya, if we talk about Gaza for a moment, as we mentioned, there seems to be no let-up in Israel's relentless assault on the territory as it continues to attack Gaza City. But in New York, they put forward this proposal led by France and Saudi Arabia for some type of international force in a post-war Gaza. If that were to happen, and I accept this seems unlikely at this point, what would that look like to you? Is that a viable post-war plan?
I mean, as far as what the West is concerned about, the Anglo-Saxon world especially, is very hypocritical. I mean, we're talking about Australia, Canada, the UK, and soon, as I said, probably the US will understand the value of this so-called diplomatic gibberish that they talk about two-state endlessly for decades have been talking about two-state. There's no two-state solution to colonial, anti-colonial struggles. There's only one of three possible scenarios. There's a scenario of Algeria, where 1 million French pack their bags and go to France. I don't say back to France because they were in Algeria for 6, 7, 8 generations. That's a very rare scenario. The second, also rare scenario, is complete genocide of the indigenous people, as happened in Australia and what became also known as the United States of America, where there's very few left over in reservations and etc. The third scenario is the most common scenario found throughout the world, which is that the descendants of the colonized and the descendants of the colonizers live in one country, kumbaya, not happiness, but that's what it is in all of the world. That's in South America, Central America, and Canada, and Mexico, in all of Asia, all of Europe, etc., and South Africa most recently. This is the reality in a post colonial world. The attempt to delay these outcomes, the attempt to, keep talking endlessly about the fourth non existing outcome. I mean, the talk about two states, there's actually more Jewish settlers here where I am in the West Bank per square kilometer. There are more Jewish settlers than inside the Green Line. Where are you going to have a state? What state are you talking about? As mentioned by Haim, where? Draw me. What exactly are you talking about? And there's no such thing that is possible in a colonial, anti-colonial struggle. So they have to choose one of the three previous scenarios. Israel has made its choice, which is scenario number one, number two, which is the extermination of the Palestinian population, an endless conflict supported by the United States, because the Washington, D.C. is also Israeli occupied territory, and they have, as mentioned by Colonel Wilkerson, you have basically Trump is in their pocket, so they don't have to worry about that. So that's what they think, and they will fail at that. And the Western governments are trying to save them, actually, with this talk about two-state solution. They're trying to offer them a way to prolong the colonial oppression by endlessly talking about two states. This the Palestinians will not accept. This the hundreds of millions of people on the street will not accept around the world, and we will see what happens.
Lawrence Wilkerson, what that last scenario that Mazen just described there is, do you see that as the most likely thing to happen here? That, forget about two-state solution, forget about a separate Palestinian state. That's just not the reality on the ground right now. That there has to be some sort of a solution that's going to give Palestinians full rights, full sovereign rights in one state.
Yes, I think that's inevitable, despite my old boss, Richard Haas's piece about 2 weeks ago, where he said his two-state solution is still possible. I don't think it is. I think it's long gone. I don't think a Jewish state in the Levant has any future either. So we need some kind of, as the professor suggested, reconciliation, if you will, temporary reconciliation, and then build out into a full-blown, hopefully liberal democratic state that features both populations. It cannot be a Jewish state, and it probably should be named with prominence Palestine-Israel, or whatever we want to call it. But that's probably the only solution. However, as I've said, I don't think that's going to be in the works anytime soon, because I think Israel is on a suicidal mission under this current government. And I'm sad to say, deeply sad to say, still, polling being correct, 75 to 80% of the Jewish Israeli citizens being supportive of it, regardless of what they've seen done to their country up to this point, which is quite traumatic for them, I'm sure, even though much of it has been hidden by Netanyahu from his own people. So that's a long-winded answer, but I think the professor's right.
We don't mind long-winded answers. Haim Rashid, if I could turn to you on this, how do you see this playing out then over the next few weeks and months?
Well, I think we need to talk about years. I wish we could talk about weeks and months in terms of the genocide, but there are no signs that this is going to stop, which is the most serious aspect. I think Mazen Qamsi has described the three outcomes that are possible. And of course, I totally agree with him that the only possible one, the only democratic one, the only equal and peaceful solution is everyone who is now in Palestine, and of course the refugees. Remember that the UN has demanded that the refugees should be allowed back into their country. So this is the only solution that will bring an end to the colonial conflict. We need to decolonize Palestine. Everything else will not be acceptable, not just to the Palestinians, but to the millions of people who are walking, including in the West, including where I am. In the UK, there were more than 1.5 million, a number of times, walking the streets because they don't accept what the West is doing. I think, people should face this. What is wrong with democracy? In South Africa, we didn't say, let's have a white state for apartheid people, and let's have a black state for the least important population. Yeah, we didn't go for a racist solution in South Africa. Why are we going for a racist solution in Palestine? It's not going to work. We have to have proper decolonization of Palestine. From the river to the sea, Palestinians should be able to be free and to live there with full rights.
All right, thank you to all of our guests, and thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Sika. We'll see you next time.